Vivian said this podcast topic might make us unpopular.
Yeah, I think it's a little nitpicky and potentially we're just reading into things.
Yeah, but you guys can be the judge of this. So why don't we tell everyone how we got on this topic?
So this all started when I saw this TikTok by @BrittanySpill on TikTok. We'll attempt to play the audio right now.
I ruined a Mitski show once. I didn't necessarily ruin it. She just said, like, this song goes out to all of the people of color in the audience. And for some reason, I said, yeah, all 6 of us.
Yeah, so that got us thinking. Also, let me make a disclaimer that I'm not a Mitski fan exactly, so I think she's super talented and would totally stand her if I had listened to her more, but I just don't know too much about her yet. So um I'm just gonna add what I think about things, but Vivian will kind of be our Mitski expert for this podcast. Okay. But yeah, so basically this got us thinking about the target demographic of Asian artists, because this also tends to be the case for Biba Doobie and Loive and Michelle Zahner from Japanese Breakfast. A really simple counter argument to this phenomenon of the white alt kid following of Mitski et al. Is that that's simply the demographic makeup of America. Um, every music genre is just gonna have a huge white fan base, and that's awesome. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and this is something we talked about. There are a lot of cases of artists getting big when they gain a big enough mainstream and incidentally white following. Mitski first gained popularity back in 2020 with her song Strawberry Blonde, coinciding with the TikTok cottagecore movement during the pandemic. I had already been a fan of hers before this, mind you. So maybe I'm just being like a gatekeeper, but to me it seems like a lot of her new fans who were again predominantly white were completely missing the point of her lyrics. And I'll read some of the lyrics now. I love everybody because I love you. When you stood up, walked away barefoot, and the grass where you lay left a bed in your shape, I picture it soft and I ache. Then it heads into the chorus that everybody knows. Look at you, strawberry blonde, fields rolling on. I love it when you call my name. Can you feel the bumblebee swarm watching your arm? I love it when you look my way. To me, as an Asian American, the meaning of these lyrics was automatically clear. Mitski was depicting that strong desire we've all felt at one point in our lives to be white. I mean, growing up, we were taught that white was the most beautiful thing in the world. Blue eyes, blonde hair, pale skin, etc.
Yeah, basically it's just describing white as an aspirational thing for young Asian Americans, or young Asians. Um, but yeah, so when you heard the song, it immediately struck you, but maybe not for everyone else.
Yeah, to me, it felt like a majority of the public kind of missed the point. I mean, I remember talking to a classmate of mine who is white and who was a fan of her music. And when I told him the actual meaning of the lyrics, he was completely surprised.
Right, and that does happen to all sorts of music. Obviously, not just Mitski, but continue.
I just find it odd that for someone who sings a lot about her Asian American identity, Mitski has a surprising amount of white fans. What it looks like to me is that a lot of her white fans only like her music for its vibe. They like the poetry of her lyrics, but not the message or the meaning behind it. And that's what happened with her most recent song, too, My Love, Mine All Mine, which is about self-love, but has also been interpreted as a romantic song by the public, which, I mean, no interpretations are wrong, but people are completely disregarding the artist's own meaning here.
Yeah, I actually didn't know about that one, about the my love, mine all mine is yeah, I didn't know that it was being misinterpreted either, so I'll have to look into that. But yeah, do you think what we're seeing here is kind of like a Drake phenomenon, or when some rappers have a large white boy following, it's like, oh, that's funny.
And like maybe we should be critical of how we respond to white majority fan bases, because it's not a bad thing at all that Drake appeals to a large swath of white boys.
Right. Like, although, I mean, Drake isn't really singing explicitly about his racial identity, I think. I don't know. I'm not.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm like not a huge Drake fan, but Mitski is. So like I think the question is like maybe the predominantly white fan base isn't unexpected. Like another thing that I thought about in the realm of counter arguments is that all sorts of music genres have diverse fan bases. I listen to rap. I know most of his content is not for me per se, and I'm like never gonna get Kendrick Lamar exactly or entirely, but that doesn't mean that his message is lost on most of his followers. I'm like wondering if Mitski's racial identity stuff is getting overlooked by followers, and it's evidenced by like not the presence of white listeners but the absence of Asian or BIPOC ones.
Yeah, and when we were talking about this earlier, we were like, well, what type of music appeals a lot to the AAPI community at large?
And then we were like, oh, K-pop. Even though I don't personally listen to K-pop, but then that also gets interesting, right? Because it's like, well, what exactly about K-pop is bringing us together? It's in a language that neither you nor I understand, and like what exactly makes it common to the Asian American experience besides solely like the visuals, like they are visibly Asian.
Yeah, and like Mitski is, you know, quote unquote, visibly Asian, but that doesn't mean she becomes a universal AAPI artist or genre.
Yeah, and that kind of gets at the coastal Asian American versus Midwest slash Southern Asian American diaspora thing that, like, we've talked about this before, this podcast, just like you and me. But
Yeah, like people on the coasts often grew up in more diverse places, and being Asian was not as much of a part of their identity.
yeah, like, personally, like, for example, in my life, I didn't feel as much of a need to make my womanhood central to my identity growing up, but I did make Asianness, like, part of my identity because it stood out a lot more. So maybe for coastal Asians, where they live in more diverse parts of the country, other parts of their identity are more central to them than their ethnicity. Like, I have friends who grew up in areas where 65% of their school was Asian. So being Asian then in a way for them was like an afterthought in that sense. And for some of them, their first exposures to microaggressions happened in college, in Boston, of all places.
Yeah, and so with Mitski, I think she probably resonates more with Midwestern Asians and Wasians in predominantly white spaces, where you would regularly be bombarded with aspirations of whiteness.
Yeah, and there are much fewer of us.
Yeah, maybe Mitski has already attracted every Midwestern or Southern Asian in America.
Yeah, all 16 of us.
So, yeah, that's kind of what our discourse has been surrounding Mitski.
I will say the first Mitski fan I ever met was a Korean man. Shout out, but everyone else following that, besides you, I guess, has been white.
And yeah, we haven't really touched on Michelle's Honor from Japanese Breakfast, or Biba Doobie, or Loewe.
Yeah, I think I would put Loewe and Biba Doobie in the category of not writing like pretty much anything on their racial experience.
Like, Loewe has a couple songs about her, you know, like Asian diaspora experience. I think she grew up in Iceland.
Okay, yeah. See, I don't know about these artists, so I probably can't comment too much. But I would say Michelle Zauner is definitely very vocal about her Korean American experience. I mean, she even redid "Be Sweet" in Korean. Her book "Crying in H Mart" is like so very obviously AAPI, which doesn't mean she shouldn't only appeal to Asians. Of course, like she has a large white following, and that's great. And so maybe it's just like Asians just don't like alt music en masse right now. Yeah. Yeah, like I know Michelle Zauner wrote in her book how she grew up in the predominantly white Pacific Northwest and would listen to a lot of music that was predominantly that was dominated by white people, and I think that's kind of like you and me too. You know, we grew up here in the Midwest. I have a friend who lives in Wisconsin who's a person of color, and we joke about liking white Midwest boy music all the time, because like it's good, so why not? But it is like haha funny, like we like emo white boy music, you know. But yeah, I don't know. This kind of brings up a huge nebulous topic of white adjacency that I've been thinking about ever since I moved back to Iowa. And yeah, like after being here for a while, I think I've started to want to do more, traditionally white hobbies like hiking and camping and backpacking. I actually told two different BIPOC friends that I wanted to get into backpacking, and they were like, haha, you want to be white boy granola? And I was like, yeah, kind of. But like, that is a real thing that I think about because, like, when you're starting a new hobby, you kind of worry if you're going to fit in with like the people who kind of frequent the hobby. Like, what if I'm not like granola enough for backpacking, or what if I'm not white adjacent enough for this hobby? Like I was even telling my classmates recently, like I've never really been camping. I don't have a white dad to teach me those things, and yeah, they laughed at that, but it's also a little bit true, like in a stereotypical sense. So yeah,
Yeah, white adjacency is a whole other topic, but I see what you mean.
yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much all we have for you guys today.
Let us know if any of this makes sense or if we're completely delulu.
Yeah, bye guys.
Bye.